with Antonio Pierce as the head coach. The Raiders, big win yesterday. They looked good. You know what I mean? They looked real good winning that game yesterday. They had AOC. Hopefully that's AOC, not Derek Carr. They looked dead on each other and all that good stuff. But AOC did take over yesterday. He was decent yesterday, 219 yards, 16 to 25. And he threw a touchdown pass. Let me make sure that I'm all the way right with that, though. But you know what? At the end of the day, they were playing against a Giants team that just was trying to survive. Because as soon as the games pretty much started, Daniel Jones tore his ACL. So he's out. You got to bring DeVito back in. DeVito is a third string quarterback on any team in the NFL. DeVito was probably, he was a fun little story at Syracuse for 5 minutes. And then they started being a sorry team again. But DeVito is a gamer. He's a guy that's you can trust to show up and at least try. And he did try a little bit yesterday, but it just wasn't enough. If you really compare the numbers, you would say that Vito did a little bit better, even though he threw 2 interceptions, but he went 15 for 20. And he also was able to figure some things out, get really comfortable. Saquon Barkley had 90 yards yesterday on the ground, 23 receiving. So he did his portion. He did his job, showing the value of having Saquon Barkley. Doesn't really matter who your quarterback is, as long as Saquon's out there being active and helping, he can really go ahead and affect the whole offense to be successful if you play it the correct way. And I think the ball is pretty much knows this and appreciates this as well too, because on 20 touches yesterday, Saquon got literally 40% of the yardage for this team. But when you really look at everything, it was all about the Raiders yesterday. Josh Jacobs had 26 carries for 98 yards. So that means that Pierce was really into making sure they ran the ball yesterday as well too. They game plan for that. Jacoby Myers also went ahead and scored a touchdown on a reverse yesterday, 17-yard scamper, and he was pretty good in the receiving game, 38 yards. But Tucker was the man yesterday. He's the guy with the high number, 2 receptions for 52 yards. And Devontae Adams, once again, another lackluster type of game. Yes, he was involved. He got 7 targets yesterday, but he caught 4 balls for 34 yards. That's just, we got all this complaining going on. We got I'm a weapon, this, that, and the third, and the guy still isn't really showing up week in and week out. Last week it was what? 1 catch for 11 yards on 7 targets. And then the week before that, it was 7 receptions on 57 yards. He's had 1 good game this year, and it was against Pittsburgh. And that's because they were looking for him all night long. He had 20 targets that night, 172 yards receiving, and he had 2 touchdowns. So there has to be something that's going to really, really move the right way for the Raiders when it comes to Devontae Adams. You just cannot waste this type of player. But Devontae, there is something else more going on with Devontae than just him struggling in these games. He's been a little hurt. He's been a little gimpy in these last few games. And I know by the time we get to the end of the season, they'll go ahead and say that Devontae Adams had a lingering injury that affected his play. It has to be something of that accord, because Devontae should still be getting at least 85 to 90 yards per game minimum, because the guy is open half the time anyway. So I just don't understand. But you know what? When the quarterback's under a lot of distress, a lot of pressure, these things tend to happen. You know what I mean? So pretty much the Raiders yesterday, very good effort. Very good effort. They played a great game. They put themselves in position to continue a bit of a run to possibly maybe sneak into the playoffs. But it's a lot of heavy lifting that the Raiders have to do, because right now, if you have a losing record in the AFC, you really have to tell yourself that we're probably getting ready for the draft, because it's really hard to catch up with this group. And you already have teams like Indianapolis ahead of you, Houston's ahead of you as well too. You got Buffalo, New York ahead of you, and then you have the whole AFC North ahead of you as well. So it's a really tough conference in a sense. So do the Raiders really have a shot at making the playoffs? I doubt it. But you know what? For the fan rapport and fan, participation and everything like that, the Raiders get an A+ because they made sure that they did this for the fans. You know what I mean? But I really feel like they just put a Band-Aid on a leaking radiator. That's all they did. At the end of the day, you got to get the radiator fixed, right? And I think the Raiders aren't going to get the radiator fixed until the end of the year. They are just happy that they don't have Josh McDaniels as the coach anymore. But I truly do feel at the end of the day, the mistakes are so heavy and so blatant that the Raiders are going to be affected by all this for the next 5 to 6 years. They're not going to be back to being a great team for a while. And I think that, you know, over investing in head coaches and then not being able to hold on to these head coaches is going to be the burden that really does sting the Raiders for this period of time. It was all good. It was great, smoking cigars all throughout the locker room, blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, this is not going to be conducive to winning football week in and week out. You beat a team that barely tried, okay? And so let's not play the game like you went ahead and you're one of the elite teams in the NFL and you just needed to make a change. You guys just really pretty much showed all of us that you're only going to play if you like the coach. And if that's the only time you're going to play, then you know what? You're not really worthy. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, because in reality, the champions, they play for each other. Real NFL, real teams, they play for each other. They don't play for coaches. They don't play for the owners. They don't play for any of that. They play for themselves to try to get themselves to the greater goal. But when you saying that we're not going to try until we get another coach, that just gives me the idea that you guys are a bunch of babies. And at the end of the day, I'm not defending Josh McDaniels, but the players need to be more accountable as well too, because they made a lot of bonehead mistakes, and those bonehead mistakes aren't going anywhere. Sorry, they're not. They'll be back to it next week when they play the Jets. So with that, we move forward and we have ourselves the Eagles surviving a war with